Okay, now that we've watched the intro video, we're going to go ahead and get started into our project. Um, this is the DHS Teacher's Frankenstein monster. So we're going to start by opening up all of the images that you downloaded in the intro paragraph page. It had the example, it had some links to some photos, so please make sure that you download all 7 of the photos that we're going to use for this project. The 7 photos include the 5 that you can see in the tabs here, the one for Mr. Mispagel, Coach King, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Stamey, myself, and there's also a picture called background, and the last picture is Mr. Byers. So we have to start by opening up our photos. And I'm going to do that by going to File, Open, and then finding the pictures that I have. So currently I have all of mine in one folder. So that might make it a little bit easier for you to locate your photos and easily open all of them at one time so that you can follow along. So if you need to, make sure you pause the video as we go. Maybe pause, put all of your images into a folder, and this will make it easier for you to open all of them all at once. Currently, I do not have the background photo and the Mr. Byers photo open. So I'm going to open both of those to start. And the way that I can select both of them is by clicking on one, holding the Command key on my keyboard, and clicking on the second one, and then clicking Open. Once I've done that, the two images will open. You can see it kind of puts them at the end, or puts both of those in the end in their new tabs. So I can click on those different tabs and look at the other photos that I'm going to be using throughout this project. Okay, we're actually going to reorganize some of these tabs. I want to work in just a little bit of a workflow, or organize my workflow. I want Mr. Byers' photo to be at the beginning, then Mr. Mispagel's, then Coach King's, then Mr. Johnson's, then Mr. Stamey's, then the picture of myself, and then the background image will be the last one. So I'm going to start by moving the photo of Mr. Byers. I click and hold, and then I'm just going to drag it over along those tabs to the very beginning and then drop it. And that is going to reorganize mine. I'm going to keep that background image at the very end, because I won't need that here until later. The next thing that I need to do for this project is I need to have somewhere that we're going to house all of the selections that we use to create Frankenstein's monster. So we're going to start by going to File, New, and we are going to create a document that is 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, and please make sure that the background contents are transparent. We don't want to have a background when we're building this because eventually we're going to put it into the background image later. So just make sure that you have a transparent background set. Once I open that, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, and that is going to stay at the very end. We will get to this one here in just a little bit. The next thing we need to do is go back to our photo of Mr. Byers. We're going to make our selection of Mr. Byers now. For this project, we're going to use Mr. Byers' body, not his head, just his upper body. We are also going to use Mr. Mispagel's head. That's why we're zoomed in on Mr. Mispagel's head in picture number 2. We'll use Coach King's right leg, which has already been selected, Mr. Johnson's left leg, Mr. Stamey's right arm, my left arm, and like I already said, Mr. Byers' body. So we're going to go ahead and get started with that. You can grab any selection tool you want to do this. I'm going to start with my magnetic lasso tool. And I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more, just so I can see a little bit more of them. Remember, you can always refine your selection later. I'm going to start by using his collar. I don't want to include his neck, but I do want to include his collar. So I'm going to click, and using that magnetic lasso tool, I'm going to go down his arm, and then we don't want to include his sleeves here, so I am going to just go down along here. Again, like I've mentioned already, you can always refine this later. I'm going to drag down just a little bit to make a better selection. Get a quick selection. Again, I don't want to include his sleeve here. Okay, let's scroll back up just ever so slightly. Okay, and we will refine the selection as we go. I'm going to click, and then as I drag down, Make sure we go down the neckline, come back out, and then once we get back to the end, we want to make sure that we find that little circle that comes up next to the magnetic lasso tool and click so that it makes our selection. I'm going to use my quick mask tool, so I'm going to grab my brush tool and hit Q on my keyboard so that I have my quick mask. I'm going to flip my foreground and background color to white. That way I can get rid of this red and really refine that mask. Remember, if I make a mistake, I can always flip back to black using the X key on my keyboard so that I can paint red back over the top. If you need to increase your brush size, just make things easier for yourself. These are the things that we've been talking about in class the last few days. So think about those as we've been going forward. This is nothing new at this point in time. Okay, I'm going to continue getting rid and refining this selection. Make sure that I have a good selection made here. And last little bit, I'm going to get rid of that belt line right there. So after you have made your selection, okay, and refined it in your quick mask, if that's what you like to do, remember, make sure you exit quick mask so that you have a selection made. So I'm going to hit Q on my keyboard to exit that selection or that quick mask. And I can see that I missed a little bit right there, so I'm going to go back in there and get rid of that just a little bit right there to make that just a little bit better. At that point in time, that's just just showing that I'm a bit of a perfectionist in this. It doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, this is a monster. So, not that Mr. Byers is a monster. So again, exiting quick mask, I'm going to unlock this layer so that I have my selection. And the next thing that I want to do is make a copy of that layer or that selection. So a new layer by copy. I can do that by going to Layer, and I can go to New, and then Layer via Copy, or I can hit Command J on my keyboard. So I'm going to actually just hit Command J. You can see over in my Layers window, it makes a selection for me. So that selection is now its own layer, and this is going to allow me to move my layer, that copy, into my Untitled 1 document in the next video without cutting things out of that image, just in case I need to come back and refine that selection and change it a little bit because I realized, oh, you know what, my selection wasn't very good. So I'm going to let you now go ahead and make the selections and refine the selections for the rest of the images, which would be Mr. Mispagel. We're going to select his head. Coach King, we're going to select his right leg. Mr. Johnson, we will select his left leg. Mr. Stamey, you'll select his right arm. And then myself, you will select my left arm. If I zoom out, you'll see it is the one that's up in the air. Okay? Don't need to do anything with the background, but that's all for this video. Make sure that you make all of those selections. That way we are ready to create our monster in the next video.